Welcome to the RC Adventure Channel, everybody. So this video is going to be a little bit different than the others in that there's not going to be much RC stuff here. See, since I moved to the Fort Walton Beach area a few months ago, I've noticed that basically everybody around here has a boat. In fact, I think there's actually more boat dealers in the area than there are car dealerships. Now, a new runabout type boat is going to start at about $20,000 for the cheapest ones. And since I just bought a truck, I don't exactly have $20,000 just sitting around to buy a boat with. Also, I don't want something that's going to have higher operating costs later on down the line. So with that in mind, I went looking for a smaller fiberglass hull outboard. Outboards are cheaper to operate than inboards. They're a lot easier to work on because everything's kind of out there in the open. And worst case scenario, if the engine's just total piece of junk, it's usually only held on by 4 bolts and some wiring. You can easily pull it off and put a brand new engine on there. An inboard, you may not even be able to put a new one in there, period. And if you can, it's probably going to be really difficult to do. Now, as far as the hull goes, fiberglass is pretty darn low maintenance, and I have quite a bit of experience working with fiberglass, so I know I can fix anything that I find wrong with it. Another thing to consider is that older boats tend to be a lot simpler and easier to work on than newer boats. With all that in mind, I settled on a 1973 Larson All-American 156, which comes with its factory original 1973 Johnson 65 horsepower 2-stroke outboard. Another reason I wanted an older boat like this one is that growing up, we had this fiberglass runabout from the 1950s, and we never really had a whole lot of money, so when we did take the boat out, it was always a really special thing. And, you know, an excited little kid, I always wanted to jump right in there and help my dad get the boat ready to go. And it was from working with my dad like that I developed a real passion for building and creating things, and why I'm now restoring a boat in the garage. So yeah, this one's for you, Dad. Anyway, back to the project at hand here. Now, I really would prefer to put a brand new engine on the boat, but dealerships just don't have anything in stock right now. So I'm going to pull this one off and overhaul it. A few tips for a successful rebuild of any kind of engine, be it car, plane, boat, whatever. Organization and documentation. In this case, organization starts with that piece of cardboard that you see on the right side there, where I've marked out the bolt pattern for every major component on the engine, such as, say, the cylinder head, crankcase, and so on. And whenever I take a bolt out, I put it in its associated spot on the cardboard, so that way when I go to reassemble it, I can make sure the bolt goes back in the same spot. Also, every component on the engine that gets labeled as it gets removed, that way I know exactly what it is and where it goes. Documentation comes more in the form of just taking a whole lot of pictures of everything as it comes off, so that way if I need to figure out how it goes back on, I can go back and reference those pictures. Another huge help in this overhaul was having a factory service manual. I didn't go buy a brand new manual. Instead, I just looked around online and I found somebody that had them available for download, and it cost all of $5 to do so, and then printed it off and stuck it in a 3-ring binder. And since I can print it again, I wasn't afraid to go ahead and mark this one up with notes along the way. Now, rather than researching and buying all the parts that I needed for this individually, I actually found a company called Tri-State Marine who sells an overhaul kit for this exact power head, and that came with gaskets, seals, rings, pistons. I think there was roller bearings in there. It was a long list of things. It was a big box when it came, so that really helped out a lot. Now, the one thing the rebuild kit does not come with are the overhaul kits for the carburetors. Now, Johnson's parent company, BRP, does still offer those kits, and they actually cover a wide range of carburetors, so there's going to be a bunch of extra O-rings and seals and stuff in there that you're probably not going to need for whichever carburetors you're overhauling. Those kits, by the way, also do not come with the calibrated orifices, which is what these carburetors use to control the fuel-air mixture ratio in this engine. You've got to get that separately, and those also require a special tool to remove from the carburetor, which itself is another separate thing, and usually runs about $30. But if you look around a little online, you will find them. I'll see if I can put a link in the description for all these things that I just listed. And just like my dad did, yeah, I got my kids involved too. Brian here really had a lot of fun taking this engine apart and then helping me put it back together. When it came time to put the power head back on, by the way, I thought I'd just be able to kind of lift it into place, sort of reverse of what I did to take it off. But yeah, that wasn't working, so I ended up making a temporary fixture of sorts for attaching the engine to the workbench, and then was able to use the cherry picker to lower it in place like you see here. Oh, and while we're still looking at it, notice all the wiring and the linkages between the 3 carburetors and the choke solenoid. Good thing I had pictures to fall back on to make sure I put all that back together right. And as a side note, if you ever find yourself trying to take the power head off of a 1973 Johnson 65 horse, and you've read the manual, and you've said the manual says there's 3 bolts on either side and 2 studs on the back you got to take the nuts off of, yeah, they're actually lying. There are 3 bolts, but there's only 1 stud. It's not where they said it would be. It's hard to see, harder to get to, and since there's a really good chance that the drive shaft may actually be stuck into the crankshaft, you want to make sure you've got everything off, because it's going to take a fair amount of pulling to get the 2 separated, and you don't want to just go yanking on things and risk breaking something, until you know for sure that everything's out there. So don't end up like me, spending several hours looking for a stud that isn't there. With all that in mind, if I ever meet the Johnson engineer that wrote this manual, I'm probably going to give him a heartfelt kick in the nuts. Anyway, moving on. With the engine squared away, it was time to move on to the hull. First thing I did was to pull up the carpet, because it was getting kind of nasty, and wanted to kind of upgrade to that new EVA foam that everybody's using. And that's when I noticed that there was a new piece of wood sitting on top of the old floorboards. So I picked that up, because it wasn't really held in by anything anyway. And that's when I found out that the floorboards had largely rotted away. So I cut out the old floorboards and scraped out the waterlogged open cell foam that was underneath them, then vacuumed out the stringers, because what was originally solid pieces of oak had turned into mulch, so they weren't doing anybody any good. The first new wood part to go in was the replacement transom. It's 3/4 inch marine grade Douglas fir plywood that I got from the local hardware store. I coated both sides of it with thin epoxy to keep water from getting to it. Next thing to go in was a new pair of oak stringers, and those are kind of one of those trial and error fit kind of things until you get it just right. And of course I completely coated those with thin epoxy too before gluing them in. Once the stringers were completely glued in place and the epoxy had set up, I then cut out a new floorboard from the same plywood that I made the transom from, and then coated the bottom of that floorboard with thin epoxy as well. Before that could set up though, I put thickened epoxy on top of the stringers and put the floorboard in place, and then ran several screws through it to make sure that that floorboard was securely attached to the stringers, because this is all structure on the boat, so it needs to be really strong. I then finished securing the floorboards in place with 3 layers of fiberglass tape around the edges, and then sealed everything up with a good thick layer of epoxy. Now that I had something to sit on, I could start removing all the old wiring and gauges on there, and then start stripping everything off the hull to get it ready for repainting. As far as the paint goes, I did do it myself. I just didn't do it at home because the landlord kind of frowns on me doing such things in the garage. So I rented a local paint booth. I did it there. I just didn't record it because I didn't want to get paint on the camera. For the colors, as you can see, I went with traditional white on the bottom of the hull, and I've actually got some big graphics that are being made up that are going to cover a large part of that, so I figured there was no need to do anything super fancy with that part of the paint. The orange on the top is a little bit darker than the original. It's got a little bit of metallic flake going on. Mitsubishi developed this several years ago for the Lancer, if I remember correctly. Next up, I installed a new instrument panel, and in addition to replacing the gas gauge and the speedometer, I also installed a tachometer and a battery monitor. And then I installed all new wiring throughout the entire boat. And if you pay attention on the left side, you'll see there's actually a new fuse block over there too, so I can now use new automotive style blade fuses. And there's even a few spots left over in there, so if I wanted to install something like a stereo or whatever, I can do that. I then used some inexpensive interior tongue and groove type wall paneling that I found at the hardware store to make up new side pocket panels for the inside of the boat. Next up, it was time to start doing some upholstery work. The front seats actually looked pretty good. Looked like they got reupholstered in the last few years, and the wood frames on them were good, but the back seat was completely shot. So I made a whole new frame for that one and then also reupholstered it. Then my wife came back from her TDY, so I had to give up that nice comfy garage for the storage lot. All the wood parts you see me working with, by the way, are just inexpensive white pine that I stained and clear coated to give them a nice shine and protect them. I then installed I guess they call this like a trumpet style horn up here on the bow, mostly because it looks good, but also because I wanted everybody to be able to hear me. And then on the inside here, this is white EVA foam with kind of a diamond cut to it, and I thought it provided a nice contrast on the interior, plus it draws in some of the white parts of the boat now, like the hull, and you'll see there's some little stripes kind of on the floor to make the floor look like a teak kind of look. Not really sure how to describe it, but you'll see in a bit. Now the adhesive backing on this EVA foam is really strong stuff, but it still needs a good surface to bond to, and wood by itself doesn't cut it. what you need to do is seal it with something. And in my case, I used epoxy, which I put down in several layers, sanding in between to give a good, strong, smooth surface for it to bond onto. And once it's bonded, it's permanent. It's not going anywhere. I then screwed the seats in, and one of the cool things you notice about these seats is that they can fold. So they go from being like 4 individual seats into 2 big benches for when you're just out there in the lake floating around. Kind of gives you a little more interior space. I thought that was a pretty neat idea. And last but not least, time to bolt the engine back on. Now, I wasn't entirely confident I would be able to locate the original mounting holes after filling and painting everything, so I did a little bit of research to learn the proper location for an outboard engine on a boat, and I found that the original setup was actually about 1.5 inches too low. So I mounted the engine just a little bit higher to get it in the right spot, hooked up all the plumbing and wiring and control cables and everything, and started getting it ready for that first time out on the water. All right, with all the mechanical stuff finally worked out, hopefully anyway, next thing that I'd like to do is a vessel safety check, which is done by the Coast Guard Auxiliary. And here to explain what that is, because I'm really not even sure how to explain it, is Joe Reichel of the Coast Guard Auxiliary.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Joe Reichel. I'm from the local Coast Guard Auxiliary Flotilla 1-4 here in the Destin-Fort Walton Beach area. A vessel safety check is something that we do to enhance boating safety and recreational boating safety for the general public. We come out and do an examination free of charge where we use a checklist that has various items that we look for. We do not have law enforcement capabilities, so if we find something, it's between the auxiliary and the owner. We do not issue any type of citation or anything of that nature. We do not notify the Coast Guard of any discrepancy that we find. Once we complete the exam and it is successful, we have a decal that we issue. The decal is placed on the port side of the vessel. It does not guarantee that the vessel will not be stopped by the Coast Guard, by Fish and Wildlife, or any other law enforcement agency. What it does, it says that they have successfully passed for this year an examination. If there's more than one vessel out there and you have a vessel safety check decal on board, the chances of you being stopped are a lot less than somebody that does not have one of these decals on board. We look at such things as display of the numbers. We look at the registration. We look at the personal flotation device or life jackets. And by the way, anytime you're on board a vessel, the Coast Guard and the Coast Guard Auxiliary highly recommend that you wear a life jacket because it can save your life. We also look at various safety items that are mandatory either by the state or by the federal government. We do not look at the structural integrity of a boat because we're not qualified to look at that. Our job is to take a look at the safety equipment and make sure that it is on board. And we also give some pointers as to how that operates and how you can interface with rescue vehicles in case you do get into an emergency situation while you're out on the water. We also talk about other things, marine domain awareness, environmental protection, general safety features while you're out on the water. And like I said, once this is all done, we sign the paperwork, we get the decal, and that's pretty much what we do. And again, it is free of charge. And what
price.
you can do is contact the Coast Guard at Station Destin, and they will contact us, or you can go online. You can do a search for I want a vessel safety check, and it will bring up a website where you fill out the information, and the computer automatically sends us a notification saying such and such would like to have a vessel safety check, and then we contact them and arrange a time and a place to have the exam done.
Cool. All right, well, so like I said, much better explanation than I could have given. And yeah, I do like that price tag, that free thing. And so yeah, I guess next thing we got to do here is put that sticker on.
Next thing for you to do is to basically sign right there.
Okay. There you go. Famous YouTuber autograph right here. This paper's now worth a lot of money.
Okay. And we give you the decal.
All right.
And
wipe it. Yeah, real thorough cleaning here.
It needs to go on the port side.
Port side, right?
Yeah.
So we're
left. Right there would be good.
There.
Give you a copy of this.
All right.
And you're all set.
All right.
An exam like this normally takes in the neighborhood of about 15 minutes. We will answer any question you have as far as water safety is concerned. And again, the main job of the Coast Guard Auxiliary is recreational boating safety. Make it safe for you and the other people that are out on the water.
All right, well, I guess we're all set here then. Just go ahead and check the description for some links. I'll have some links there to the Coast Guard Auxiliary's website. And also, there's a great YouTube video from a guy called The History Guy. He gives on all how the Coast Guard Auxiliary got started. So some really cool stuff. And yeah, I think we're all good. Let's go have some fun, huh? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, that was a whole lot of excitement there, wasn't that? So, what are my thoughts on this boat so far? I like it, actually. This is my first motorboat, so I don't really have any experience with these things, but it seems to handle really good. Yeah, I can toss it around, and I'm only going about 20-25 miles an hour right now, so not super fast or anything, but it doesn't feel like it's about to do anything crazy. It feels solid, predictable kind of handling, so that's good. The engine obviously still needs some work. The idle wasn't really working the way I wanted it to. It took several restarts to get it out here, but you know, now that I'm here, the top end seems pretty good. I think I got to adjust the trim. This engine doesn't have electric trim, it's all manual, so I have to shut it down, raise it, reposition the pin, lower the engine, start it up again, and with how many restarts I've already gone through just trying to get out here, I'm not going to do that right now. But you know, next time I'll try it in a different position, see what happens. What would I do different if I was to do this over again? Honestly, I think I'd look for a basket case boat, actually. Because something that's in really bad shape, that's maybe doesn't have an engine or anything, you can get those for a couple $100, sometimes even for free. You know, especially if you don't want a trailer with it. There's people that they want it off their land. You know, they don't care if you can haul it, you can have it. So something like that might actually be the way I'd go next time, because I redid everything on this boat anyway. So you know, it's all new interior, it's all new wood, it's all new paint, and on a basket case kind of boat, that's what you're going to be replacing anyway. So yeah, I think that's what I would do next time, honestly. All up though, well worth it. A really fun project. Really enjoyed the work that went into this. All right, so I think I figured out everything that I need to about how this engine's working right now. So I'm gonna bring it back in, put it on the trailer. I got other stuff I gotta do today anyway. In a couple of years, I'm still gonna put a new engine on this boat, I think. New engine's got half the fuel burn of this 50-year-old thing. It doesn't have to have oil pre-mixed with the fuel. You know, it's going to be easier running, lower maintenance, cleaner, lower emissions, just better all the way around. Now, I'm not an environmentalist by any stretch of the imagination, but you know, I do try to take care of the planet when I can, kind of thing. But if you like this video though, I sure would appreciate a thumbs up. Drop a comment down below if you got any questions. I know all us YouTubers sound like broken records when we're saying that, but it really does help. It really feeds that YouTube algorithm and helps me make more of these videos for you guys. You know, if you want to see more like this one, hit that subscribe button, and the bell icon will let you know when my next video is up and ready to go. In the meantime, well, you know, I'm always saying you're not having fun till you break something, but I haven't broken anything yet. Except maybe some no wake zone rules here, but I'm trying, so catch you later. And it dies.